Hello and welcome to another low-tech video. I'm Scott with Low Technology Institute, and today we have a video about the first half of our Timberframe chicken coop build. So last year you might have seen the video where we took down a dead spruce tree on the property. We limbed it and then cut it into lengths using hand tools. And then those lengths were split. As you can see here, it's called riving, and this is all covered in an earlier video you can find on our YouTube channel. And I split this into a number of logs and took down another spruce tree on the property in the winter. And this provided all the raw material for building our chicken coop. Once down and rived, we dressed the timbers by making notches in the wood, and then using those notches, you can see the blue line there that I'm cutting to. Once all those notches are cut to the same parallel depth, I turn it on its side and I use a broad axe with a flat side to take off the excess. This takes quite a while, but you end up with logs that are fully dressed into timbers. And here we have a whole bunch of braces, which are the 45-degree angle pieces of wood that will keep the building stable. And here are some more of the timbers that go for uprights and rafters and things like that. Each one of these has to be dressed and given tenons. We don't use any nails or screws or anything like that. So we use mortise and tenon joints to hold the different logs together, or I guess hold the different timbers together. And these are kind of painstaking, and here I'm cutting a dovetail joint, which will help as we put the two halves of the timber frame together later in the video. You'll see that these are the dovetail joints. These keep the timber frame from pulling itself apart because of that wedge shape. They help hold themselves together, so this takes a little bit extra time to cut. And this pine was really knotty. It was not really great wood to work with. It had a spiral grain, which is not ideal, and a lot of knots. So it was a challenge to work with. Some of the other ends had tenons that were just squares, and these are feet that fit into the foundation sills, and you'll see that when we put the whole thing together. Here I'm cutting out all around to make basically a 2x2 pin that's going to sink into the foundation sills, and again we'll see that at the end of the video. Unfortunately, I couldn't just saw this one out because there was a big knot, and every time I tried to saw it, it would just dive, so I had to chisel it out the slow way, which was not ideal. Quite a lot of work, unsurprisingly, I suppose, but this was the work of a few months off and on, not every day, not 40 hours a week, but still is quite a good chunk of my time to take and dress each one of these individual pieces of wood. You can see I make dog ears on the end. That's to keep it from splitting. And then I go and take it off chunk by chunk. I remove about half of the wood with each pass of the chisel until I get down to fine work. Here the grain dove the other way, so I had to work backwards. Again, these were not ideal logs for timber framing, but I worked with what I had, and hey, it's just a chicken coop. And here we have the dressed logs ready to be put together. So first I put the two halves of the timber frame chicken coop together, and that involved fitting the top plate onto the posts, and while I did that I had to have the 45-degree angle braces fitting in as well. And you can see those small cylinders off to the side. Those are pins. Those are going to be driven into holes that are drilled with a little bit of an offset to help draw everything together, called draw bore with a pin through it. You can already see one pin in the lower right hand side there holding the bottom of the brace in. So I carefully fit these joints together, crossing my fingers that they all fit. One difficulty I ran into was I made the rafter, or the top post, at an angle because the roof is going to have a single pitch, and I built that in to the timber frame, and that was actually really difficult because it was an odd angle, and this was my first time doing it. I didn't have an exact great fit with everything I wanted to, and the angle was slightly off between the two halves, but not enough that it's going to make too much of a difference. These are incredibly solid structures. And here we have one side together, and I built two sides like this, and now you'll see how I added a tie beam between them. And this all stands up and the two sides come together, and I carefully slot all the different tenons into their mortises. I'm using a cinch strap to help pull things together. Everything has to slide in and it's a tight fit. I use a rubber mallet and a sledgehammer. It'd be better if I had a large wooden hammer called a beater, but I don't have one. So we slide everything in. You can see Lauren there pounding pins into the different bores. And here I'm troubleshooting a difficult joint that didn't want to go together. And now I lift it and we set the sills underneath. That's those pins I was talking about, those tenons I cut out earlier that would fit into the sill plates. That's those sinking into the sill there. I use this handy dandy beehive frame as something to stand on and have a lot of surface so I can pound down. Here we go, fitting those into the sills again. And we end up with a cube with kind of a slanted roof, which is the overall shape of the chicken coop. It's facing south so that in the summer it will get a lot of shade from that overhang on the front, and in the winter that front, you'll see later, will all be windows, so in the winter the sun will shine in and act kind of like a greenhouse, giving a lot more heat than we would otherwise give. And you can see Lauren here pounding in a pin. Each one of these joints had an individually cut bore. Now finally we're shifting the chicken coop into place on this slab that used to be a corn crib and then a gazebo, and we're using it as the foundation for a chicken coop. I'm lifting the wood up off the ground so that it doesn't soak up water when it rains. Later I'll show you how I put together a foundation after the fact. I couldn't lay down the foundation first because it was freezing still at night, so I had to wait. And here I have to use the cinch strap to draw in a tenon that didn't want to fit quite right. Most of them fit very nicely. It's always just one or two that seem to give me trouble. So. And now we're driving in the wedges. Remember I cut those dovetail tenons, and now I'm driving in wedges underneath to wedge that dovetail up against the mortise that it's cut for, and that will keep the timber frame from falling apart to the left and the right. This basically creates a wedged tail in that mortise and holds it nice and tight no matter what happens. Now I'm drilling to add a few more bores through which we're going to drive some pins, and that will help keep everything together and nice and tight. And this is the finished frame. We haven't added the door or the rafters or anything, but that comes in the next video. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for part 2 coming up in a few weeks. Check out all our videos on YouTube and subscribe to our feed. Thanks for watching.